I am glad to know that my hopefully tantalizing title lured all of you here this evening. That was certainly my strategy. So thank you very much for coming. And as you can see, the title of my presentation this evening is A Voyage to the White Shark Café. What is that all about? Well, we will find out. Well, I've been retired for about 6 years now, but during much of my career in Hawaii, I worked for many years with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, during which I conducted many hundreds of scientific coral reef surveys using scuba all throughout the United States Pacific. Now, when I meet new people and I tell them this about myself, they often ask me if I saw sharks or if they were problematic. And my honest response to this is that it was unusual not to see sharks, that my dive buddies and I always kept an eye on them while we were doing our surveys. We would assess what kind of species they were, how many there were, what their behavior was like. And we saw a lot of different kinds of sharks, including gray reef, white tips, black tip, Galapagos, and even tiger sharks. But we never had any negative encounters. In fact, it was good to see sharks because they're top-level predators and they're indicative of a healthy reef ecosystem with an intact food chain. Not to see sharks on a coral reef would be rather like going to the Serengeti and not seeing lions. Something would be missing. And so with this presentation, I would like to introduce you to the world of sharks and help you see what magnificent animals they are. And I'll also introduce you to a mysterious place in the deep ocean between Hawaii and Mexico that has been dubbed the White Shark Café. Probably nothing has done more to malign sharks in our culture than the 1975 film Jaws, which those of you in the audience of a similar vintage as I have most likely seen. This film, as you may recall, portrayed a great white shark off the coast of summertime New England, having gone amok, viciously tracking down and consuming the town's unwary residents. And perhaps it's only Herman Melville's 1851 novel, Moby Dick, that equaled Jaws in terms of portraying a deliberately evil animal. But you know, in truth, it's humans from whom sharks should be wary. For an estimated 100 million sharks are killed every year to support the appetite for shark fin soup in Asia. Now, when I saw that figure, 100 million sharks killed every year, I thought, can that be right? Are there even 100 million sharks in the ocean? But I consulted several independent sources, and I saw that same figure every time. Sharks are oftentimes still alive when their fins are sliced off and their bodies are thrown back into the sea. An entire animal and its important role in the ecosystem of the oceans completely wasted for one solitary fin. Now, I live in Hawaii, which is a pretty progressive state, but even so, it was only in this most recent legislative session that the Congress of Hawaii finally passed legislation outlawing shark finning in Hawaii. And Hawaii, of course, does depend very closely upon having a healthy ocean ecosystem to sustain its very important tourist economy. So if you ever have the chance in your travels to eat shark fin soup, please don't, because consumption only perpetuates this very inhumane slaughter. Now, before I talk about the great white shark specifically, I'd like to talk a bit more about sharks in general, to give you some context. Sharks have a skeleton made out of cartilage, which is a very strong but flexible material. If you're an older guest on board, as many of us are, cartilage is that material that tends to fray away and lead to arthritis with age. If you're a younger guest, cartilage is that part of the ear or the nose that gets pierced for studs or jewelry. Cartilage is a very strong but flexible material. It's about half the weight of bone. And for the shark, this reduces the skeleton's weight, which in turn saves energy as the animal is moving through the water. Sharks belong to a very ancient lineage that goes back some 350 million years, even predating the dinosaurs. Now, look at that timeline diagram in the upper right to compare when sharks evolved, again, even before the dinosaurs, with the roughly 5 million years since our species, Homo sapiens, emerged. There are more than 400 species of sharks that are currently living. The smallest of these is the dwarf lantern shark, only 8 inches long at maturity, and the largest is the whale shark at 40 feet in length. Now, when people think about what scares them the most about sharks, it's usually the teeth that scare them, right? It's usually the teeth that come to mind. And this cartoon shark from Finding Nemo doesn't seem quite as scary, does it, if its teeth are taken away? And their teeth would definitely keep a dentist busy for a long period of time. So if we have any dentists on board, you might consider working on shark teeth. It could be a very, very lucrative practice. And this is because shark teeth are constantly being replaced throughout their lifetime. They have multiple rows of replacement teeth that grow in a groove on the inside of their jaw, and they steadily move forward, sort of like a conveyor belt. Some sharks lose 30,000 or more teeth in their lifetime. Their tooth structure depends upon the kind of food that they eat. Dense teeth are used to crush prey with an outside shell, such as clams and crabs, and nurse sharks that live on the bottom are a good example of having this kind of tooth structure. Pointed, needle-like teeth, such as those that are found in a bull shark, are good for gripping on slippery food, such as fish and even other sharks. And the combination of having a pointed lower teeth and triangular upper teeth is good for cutting prey into smaller pieces that can be swallowed. And a good example of this is the great white shark. You can see in this image that the upper teeth are highly serrated, sort of like a bread knife, which helps in this cutting process. Whale sharks and basking sharks, which are sharks, have a large number of teeth that are greatly reduced in size, and they're not at all functional in feeding. Instead, these animals have special structures on the inside of their gills called gill raggers that function as filter feeding mechanisms when the animals are swimming through the water with their mouth wide open. So given all these teeth, if you are a dentist, you could probably have a pretty good practice working on these sharks. Lastly, in regards to teeth, I just wanted to mention Megalodon, a shark that has been extinct for a couple million years. Megalodon is probably the largest marine predator that has ever lived, ranging up to about 60 feet. This graphic on the left shows its conservative size in red, its maximum size of 60 feet in gray, and for comparison, the average size of a whale shark in purple and a great white shark in green. Its fossilized teeth are very much prized by collectors because of their size. The photo on the right shows the size of a tooth, some 13 inches long, in comparison to the size of 2 teeth from a great white shark. And the photo on the bottom shows a man sitting in the fossilized jaws of a megalodon. But they are extinct, so we don't have to worry too much about them attacking our cruise ship. But I'm sure our Captain Richards will let us know if he or his crew members see that there's any on the way. Hello? Okay. If you've ever felt shark skin at an educational display or shark skin leather boots, you know that it feels smooth when stroked in one direction, but it feels rough when it's stroked backwards, sort of like a rasp. This is because their skin is covered with what are called dermal denticles that have a very rough feel when they're stroked in a backward direction, but they provide hydrodynamic efficiency as the animal moves through the water. Now, I'm a little ahead of myself. Here we go. We humans have 5 senses: sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. Sharks have yet another sense, the ability to detect electromagnetic fields. The sense organs that enable this are called ampullae of Lorenzini, which is named after the scientist who identified them. This diagram on the left shows the general system of pores and canals they are connected to along a shark's head and snout, and the photo below shows these openings on a shark's snout. These ampullae help a shark find prey by detecting their electrical fields. They also detect the Earth's electromagnetic field, and they may help the animal with orientation and navigation. Regarding their longevity, most sharks live 20 to 30 years, but whale sharks and spiny dogfish may live more than 100 years. A specimen of Greenland shark, which is a species nearly as large as a whale shark, was estimated to be at least 272 years old, based on radiocarbon dating of crystals in the eye lens. And this makes it the longest known lifespan of any vertebrate species. So having taken a tour of the general characteristics of sharks, let's focus now on the great white. Females are larger than males, an average of 16 feet as opposed to 13 feet for males. Their lifespan is as long as 70 years, with the females not actually reaching reproductive maturity until they're 33 years old, and the males about 26 years old. Estimates of their worldwide population vary widely, but they have been classified as vulnerable to extinction by the International Union for Conservation of Nature, which is a non-governmental organization that evaluates an animal's or a plant's risk to extinction on a gradient from extinct to least concern. And this is something I talked about in much more detail in my sea turtle presentation. If you are interested in knowing more, I might suggest that maybe you go back and take a look at that part of that particular presentation. Now, off the North American coast, the primary prey items for the great white shark are the northern elephant seal, primarily the smaller juveniles, California sea lions, and harbor seals. So these seals and sea lions are big, fat, juicy prey items for the great whites. So we have finally telescoped into the Whale Shark Café. What is this? A place where white sharks sit around and enjoy a cup of coffee or two. Maybe they tell tall tales about the big guy that got away. Or maybe every once in a while they get a visit from one of my favorite cartoon characters, Sherman from Sherman's Lagoon. He is a big, fat, lazy, lovable great white shark who is always with his son Herman and his wife, coming up with some cockamamie scheme to try to catch a hairy beach ape, which of course is one of we humans. So is this White Shark Café a place where they all enjoy this kind of camaraderie and talk about we humans? No, not at all. This is an area between Baja California and Hawaii, where great white sharks that feed on the plentiful and large prey off the North American coast travel to and spend time in the fall and in the winter. This area has a radius of about 160 miles, and it was first identified in 2002 when several great whites that had been equipped with satellite tags were found to travel to this area. The mystery of what was drawing these sharks to this area in the middle of the ocean then set new research in motion. A satellite tag is an electronic device that gets attached to an animal, in this case, a great white. The image on the left side of this slide shows where that satellite tag, what it looks like, first of all, and at the end of the red arrow, where it gets attached to a shark at the base of its dorsal fin. And on the right, you can see a schematic of how the tag works. As the shark swims around, when it comes up near the surface, it relays the animal's location and other data to polar orbiting Argo satellites. And these satellites, I think, were well described by Barry Rock in his presentation about monitoring forest health from space. So their location gets telemetered up to the satellite, and this signal is then sent to a processing center, and the processing center then sends the data to a researcher on land. And in addition to the location of the shark, The tags can also record and send oceanographic information such as depth and temperature. Now, it used to be thought that great whites stayed close to continental feeding grounds year-round. Why not? There's this huge cornucopia of sea lions and, there for them to feed on. So why not stick around where the food is? So when satellite-tagged animals were found traveling more than 1,000 miles offshore, this catalyzed more research. In the spring of 2018, a research expedition that was led by Chief Scientist Dr. Barbara Block of the Schmidt Ocean Institute on board their research ship Falkor traveled to this area to learn more about sharks and their habitat. This area was dubbed the White Shark Café, and the research expedition has come to be known as the Voyage to the White Shark Café. The researchers posed a number of questions, including, why do the sharks leave the food-rich coast to travel here? What are they doing here? Are they feeding? Are they mating? Or what are they doing? And what makes this area a core part of their habitat? Well, like all research expeditions, and I've been on a few myself, quite a few myself through the years, it took a lot of planning before the ship left shore in 2018. During the previous 4 years, 80 sharks had been tagged with acoustic tags. Now, these are different from the satellite tags that I just described. The acoustic tags emit pings that are unique to each animal, sort of like a barcode of sound. When the shipboard scientists arrived at the cafe in 2018, they had cutting-edge technology to detect these pings and locate the individual animals. One of these tools was a glider that could detect the pings. A glider is an autonomous, of course, means independent, without any external control. It's an autonomous underwater vehicle that does not require any direct control by a surface operator. And you can see a couple pictured here, one at the surface and one just beneath the surface. The glider was actually carried on board the mothership, the Falkor, to the cafe area, and then it was launched. When the glider detected a ping from an acoustic tag on a shark, it could then explore as well the habitat where the shark was located using a suite of sensors with which it was equipped. It could measure conditions of the water column down to about 1,500 feet, including ocean temperature, salinity, chlorophyll, which is a measure of photosynthetic productivity. It could measure oxygen saturation, and so forth. And these kinds of data help research understand the physical oceanographic properties of a shark's habitat, which is important to understanding why they come here. Another cutting-edge tool the researchers used were two what are called sail drones. Sail drones are surface ocean vehicles that navigate, again, autonomously without any direct control by a surface operator. They navigate autonomously using a pre-programmed set of instructions, and they're powered by solar and wind energy. These were programmed to sail to the cafe from the California coast, collecting and transmitting oceanographic information in real time and sending it to satellite as they went. The sail drones actually act as scouts because with their transmitted data, it suggests where the researchers on the ship might be wanting to sample in more detail, in greater detail. So these actually started out from the California coast. They were moving with these pre-programmed instructions towards the general area of the cafe. And by the time the mothership, the Falkor, had arrived at the cafe, the sail drones had already arrived, and they had actually been present in the cafe for about a month, and they continued to scout the area. And like the glider that we saw in the previous slide, they also had acoustic receivers to detect the acoustically tagged sharks. A third tool that the researchers used was a type of satellite tag called a pop-up satellite archival tag. It has sensors for light, pressure, and temperature that record at 3-second intervals with a very precise clock. Now, in anticipation of the spring 2018 voyage, 37 sharks had been tagged off the California coast about 6 months earlier in fall of 2017. Each shark carried one of these pop-up satellite tags to the cafe, and then the tag popped off at a date and a time that had been pre-programmed into the tag that coincided with the ship's 2008 itinerary. A float on the tag brought each tag to the surface, and the tag sent radio transmissions about its location to Earth-orbiting satellites. The crew of the ship then would recover the tag now that they knew the location of the tag that had popped up, and they downloaded the environmental and behavioral data such as oceanographic conditions and the shark's diving profiles. And as a fourth tool, the researchers also used a net at different depths to explore what lives in the habitat. And each time the net is retrieved, the sample is painstakingly dissected for the diversity and abundance of animals collected during the drag. The researchers also know the volume of the water through which the net is dragged, so they can compute the density of animals, which is critical to understanding the potential food source of the area. And as a fifth tool used by the researchers to better understand the living components of the shark's habitat was a remotely operated vehicle, or ROV. You may be familiar with this technology as it first came to the public attention when it was used by Dr. Robert Ballard to explore the wreck of the Titanic. An ROV, remotely operated vehicle, is an unmanned, again, nobody inside, it's unmanned, a submersible that is controlled by a surface operator. And this ROV was equipped with cameras to record animals from 660 to 3,300 feet and send live pictures to the ship. Well, why this depth? Why 660 to 330? It seems sort of semi-arbitrary, doesn't it? But it's not arbitrary. This is what's called the deep scattering layer. The deep scattering layer, or DSL, was first discovered by operators using the newly developed sonar technology during World War II, who were puzzled by what appeared to be a shallower seafloor at night than in the daytime in the same area. Now, if you look at the little schematic I tried to piece together in the left-hand part of the slide, you can see how this works. Sound waves, represented by the red curves, are sent down from the ship, and they're reflected back from the bottom, represented by the green curves. At night, the deep scattering layer, which is represented by the horizontal green smudge in the bottom graphic, it is shallower than the sea floor, and so it was sometimes called the false bottom or the phantom bottom. Instead, it is a dense region of marine organisms that migrate up towards the surface at night to feed on plankton and back down to the depths again in the daytime. Much of the biomass in the deep scattering layer comes from lanternfish, whose swim bladders reflect the sound waves. So, what are the answers to the researchers' questions? Well, some of the preliminary results indicate that the diving behavior of males and females are very different. Males are diving up and down as much as 120 times each day, down to 330 feet. That's 0.6 of a mile. So on average, they would be diving up and down to that kind of depth 5 times an hour. I grabbed this graphic that you see here from a YouTube video in which the green lines show the diving profile of a male shark. And I hope you can see that it's up and down, up and down, up and down. However, the females are moving in a daily vertical migration, up to shallow water at night, then during the day down to between about 660 to only 1,300 feet. Now that's no more than about a quarter of a mile. They also discovered something else that was quite unexpected. Satellite images had suggested that the area of the White Shark Café was an ocean desert, a place with very little life. But after discovering the movement of the sharks to the cafe, the researchers wanted to know if there was a hidden oasis that was formed by currents that they couldn't see from space by satellite. And this turned out to be no desert at all. Instead, they found that a layer of nutrient-rich plant life exists deeper under the ocean than satellites could detect. Tiny creatures feed on this plant life, and larger creatures feed on them, and up and up and up the food chain. These are all images that I grabbed from a YouTube video about the voyage, and these oceanic animals represent parts of a complete food chain, a ladder of consumption, that made researchers believe that there probably was an adequate food supply out there for big animals like tunas and sharks. They were really surprised by how diverse the area was, with animals such as fish, squid, crustaceans, and jellyfish. They also saw totally different patterns of life in sites that were just a few miles apart, an indication of the area's complexity, microhabitats really in the ocean. The fact that scientists didn't even know that this area existed until sharks led them there speaks to how much we still don't know about the ocean. According to NOAA, humans have explored only 5% of it, so there could be many more ocean hotspots out there that we're not yet aware of. All of the information they gathered could help build a case for why the White Shark Café should be officially protected by the United Nations Cultural Agency called UNESCO that we're all familiar with. Nearly 2/3 of the ocean actually lies beyond the jurisdiction of individual nations, a vast area referred to as the high seas. We are now, right now, as we work our way towards Los Angeles, we are in the high seas. These seas don't belong to Mexico, they don't belong to French Polynesia, they don't belong to the United States. They are not under any one nation's jurisdiction. This is referred to as the high seas. And in 2018, there are 49 marine sites that are inscribed as UNESCO World Heritage Sites, but all of them are currently limited to areas inside national jurisdictions. So in 2018, experts discussed possible practical ways in which globally unique marine areas in the high seas could potentially be protected through UNESCO. And this document, whose cover you see on the left, World Heritage in the High Seas, an idea whose time has come. It identified 5 areas beyond national jurisdictions that potentially could be of outstanding universal value, and one of these included the White Shark Café. And so the researchers hope that their crews will prove to be an opportunity for policy changes to protect a region that no one thought even needed protection. And they also hope that science will be translated into action, which is something that I think every scientist hopes for, that their basic research will be translated into practical action. Even so, and this is my last slide, for the most part, I must leave you with the many unanswered questions, which is more often than not the case with research, especially of something like this that has data streams from so many different sources, very complex data streams from at least the 5 sources that I shared with you. It takes a long time to analyze all of these data streams and then to try to put them together in some meaningful kind of way, to intertwine them into some sort of explanatory explanation that is meaningful. So there are still a lot of answered questions. The reasons for the sharks' migration and what they do at this destination are still unknown. Their data does not definitively answer the question of whether they are there for mating or for foraging or for both, but it certainly suggests further research that could be done, especially as expanding ocean technologies, such as the ones that I showed you here. Many of these technologies, like the sail drone, the glider, they simply didn't exist 10 years ago. So thanks to ocean technologies expanding, they are also expanding the limits of our knowledge. Thank you very much for being on board with me during this voyage to the White Shark Café, and I hope that you have enjoyed learning a little bit more about these magnificent animals of the ocean. Thank you very much.